Lads, let's talk about net zero, where, depending on which version of the press that you read, it seems the Prime Minister suggests that we can be a clean energy exporter, and we know that the move seems to be towards at least the headline agreement of net zero 2050. Whether it actually gets passed through a parliament, whether there's a way to somehow delay it and put it after the Paris Accord, all the rest of it, well, worth talking about. We've seen your tweets, Matt, so I'll get your view on it in a second, but here's what the Deputy Prime Minister and fellow National, David Littleproud, had to say today.
What's next? If you want to rub out our coal sector, our offshore oil and gas, do you then move to cattle because it's a big producer of methane?
Regional Australia's footed the bill for much of what has been achieved in us reducing emissions at the moment. We've paid that bill. It's now time to square the ledger.
We have to make sure that we're protecting the jobs. We have to, in the same breath, understand that we are actually protecting the economy.
As for his part, each way Albo, well, he was on this side of the each way.
The Nats aren't just a rabble, they're a roadblock. It's very clear that they are completely divided when it comes to climate change. Good action on climate change is good for jobs, it's good for lowering energy prices, and it's good for lowering our emissions.
So, Matt, you were dead set against it last week. You'll be dead set against it next week, even if it's just a form of words, no legislation, blah, 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 off in the never, never. Why is this still the no-go for you?
Well, I just think it's the wrong approach for our country on a number of levels, Paul. First of all, drawing a comparison with our previous discussion, net zero makes about as much sense as COVID zero. Both of them are unobtainable, and if we try to achieve it, it'll cost a bomb. We're not going to go back to COVID zero, but some states have been trying at great cost. And likewise, we're just not going to be able to get to net zero. Fossil fuels are essential to everything we do. In fact, during the coronavirus, all those disposable masks you wear, they are made from petrochemicals. They're made from fossil fuels. So are plastics, so are glues and paints. Everything in life basically comes from fossil fuels, and we can't just switch it off unless we want to go back to the Stone Ages, and nobody wants to do that. So it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But then the UN wants us to shut down coal mining by 2030 if we sign up to net zero emissions. So I don't want to get on this train. I just drove here from the Jeringa Hotel, and sorry I was a little bit late. It's just the punters wanted to talk there at Jeringa
The perfect excuse.
And I went past multiple coal trains coming.
I look forward to that.
Sorry, I was only on the Coke Zeros. And I passed multiple coal trains coming out here, and at the prices we're seeing at the moment, each one of those coal trains with millions and millions of dollars for our nation, and we've never had higher demand. We should have a growth plan for our coal industry, not a shutdown plan. We should have a plan to how can we grow this great industry in our nation, which employs so many people at high wages, and helps the world lower its emissions given its high quality, and more importantly, helps them get out of poverty and cut air pollution in their own countries. That's what we should be focused on as a nation. And we're not focused on a policy which is only going to handicap our industry. Look at what's happening in the UK. They can't feed themselves right now, Paul. They can't feed themselves because they've shut off the North Sea gas. They're relying on Russia for gas to create fertilisers. And now they've got their food minister saying, please don't buy as much at the shops because we're going to run out of food. I don't think that should be our future. I think we should keep energy independence here in Australia, and that means keeping our coal, gas industries going, maybe building a nuclear industry too.
Now, Mark, please don't anyone think this is advocacy. It's just devil's advocacy here in this conversation, right? The suggestion from the Net Zero 2050 people is you got to do it because the EU will put tariffs on us. You got to do it because the US will find a way to retaliate. France in charge of the EU will find a way to kick us in the arse, all right? So if their suggestion is that, look, we pay a price if we don't, so let's find a way to do this without paying as much of a price as the Greens would like us to. Why is that logic wrong? How do we push back against that logic?
Well, it's the argument that the Federal Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, was putting on Friday, Paul. And there's one easy solution to this argument about the international factors and the domestic ones that Matt makes so effectively. Do some economic modelling. I mean, Josh Frydenberg spoke like he was Freddie on the street corner. He's actually got a big economic department in Canberra called the Federal Treasury, and he should model his claims. He should do an economic predictive model about the international factors and the impact on the Australian economy domestically instead of hiding behind rhetoric. And what you know out of this, whether you're talking about the Labor Party, or the Liberal Party and now parts of the National Party who advocate net zero 2050, none of them do the modelling because they know it's an economic train wreck. That's the truth of it. New Zealand is the only country I know of in the world that modelled the impact of net zero 2050, and they found a reduction, throwing away 17% of their GDP. You'd think in Australia, a much more energy and transport intensive economy, the impact for us would be 25 or 30%, throwing away GDP and household income over the next 30 years. So you can tell the cowards and the shysters in this debate, they advocate net zero 2050 without any economic modelling and data because they know it's a train wreck and it's more ideological green advocacy for them. And the other thing about this, I mean, one very useful report we have had in Australia was the 2019 CSIRO Australian National Outlook technical report. So, follow the science. Here I am quoting the CSIRO. They said for Australia to get to net zero 2050, you need policies that are the equivalent of a $200 a tonne carbon price.
Yep.
That's 8 times Gillard's carbon tax.
That's right.
That's what we're talking about here. This is not sort of a stroll in the park and some nice airy-fairy thing where we're all holding hands at the bottom of the tree singing Kumbaya. It's 8 times Gillard's carbon tax. And for fools in Matt's party like Darren Chester, who are advocating this, he's now on a platform of going 8 times harder than Gillard did with the carbon tax. I know my old mate Joel there. We've only been drinking in virtual pubs, Matt. You've been showing off. We've only had a virtual pub drinking. But Joel's been an advocate of net zero 2050, 8 times bigger than the Gillard carbon tax. That's the size of the economic wrecking ball that we're talking about, international and domestic factors combined.
Joel?
Yeah, well, you remember, Paul, that net zero emissions means putting out no more emissions than you're absorbing. And I'm comfortable with a target that's 30 years away. I don't know how you model it when you don't know what technology is available to you in 20 years or 25 years.
So why would we do it?
I'm
you don't know the cost. Why are you signing up to it then? You don't know the price.
Because I believe technology will.
Hey, can I sell you a house in 30 years' time? I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you the price.
Close to that point without.
Joel, you've got a very good technology in the sea. It's called coal mining.
I gave you a pretty good go, boys.
All right,
I believe we can get there without any adverse impact on our fossil fuel exports, metallurgical and thermal coal and natural gas. We can get there without having any adverse impact on that. It'll be in demand on our Asia markets for a long, long time to come. But you know why I'm smiling, boys, don't you? I'm smiling because in November, I think 2019, yeah, that's part of it. I had the audacity.
You don't have to sell this bullshit anymore.
I'm saying the Labor Party's got to stop putting its head above the parapet on these issues and just agree with the government and let it take all of the heat. And guess what's happened here, in 2021? Now it's the coalition tearing itself apart rather than the Labor Party, and all the focus is on them. Yeah. And on that basis, I'm now feeling vindicated.
Yeah, I got to jump, but Matt, jump in there.
But Joel, can you? I mean, it's great to have your beliefs here. It's nice to know that you believe that no coal miners will be out of work because of net zero emissions. But the hard-working men and women in the industry deserve more than your beliefs. They deserve facts. They deserve analysis. They deserve us as members of Parliament to actually do these calculations. Well, you don't have a price.
There's nothing in these international
agreements. You said yourself.
There is a price from the CSIRO.
You do not know.
I know you're a productivity commission man who loves a bit of modelling, but there is nothing in the Paris Agreement, for example, that asks us to take into account Scope 3 emissions, so we can reduce our net emissions here without impacting on our fossil fuel exports, Matt.
Joel, you said you do not know how to model a net zero emissions target because it's 30 years away. As I tried to say to you, I've got a house. I'll sell you a house in 30 years' time. I won't tell you what the price will be. I'll reveal that in 30 years' time to you. Would you agree to do that? That would be ridiculous,
It is common sense.
Because the advocates of net zero emissions do not ever tell us the price.
All
right.
I will make this exactly the same as COVID zero. They never tell us. They never tell us how much the lockdowns cost. They won't tell us how much the solution is.
We're going to sprinkle magic technology over the country. It's not going to happen, Joel. This technology argument. What about, they're going to capture the emissions and bury them in the ground? We've spent billions of dollars on that technology over 20 years.
Come on. The Norwegians have been doing it for 25 years,
magic
mate.
dust technology is hydrogen. I mean, if we had as many policy solutions as we've had technological solutions, well, we wouldn't be here talking about it now. And name me one politician that knew anything about predicting technological progress in society. Yeah. And if there is a politician who knows the technologies we're going to have 30 years from now, well, maybe this is what you're doing, mate. You're getting out of Parliament to go make some money by investing in those technologies. But generally, politicians know jack shit about what's going to happen in the world of technology.
Correct.
The Norwegians have been capturing and burying carbon for 25 years, mate. 25 years.
They've been digging up a lot of oil too. Those Norwegians love their oil.
Yeah, correct. But also, Mark,
selling a lot of oil.
I'm going to give you the last say here, Mark, because you've seen that IRO report, which also says the cost of changing the electricity grid to renewables is $1 trillion. $1 trillion to be paid.
You've got to put that in the economic model as well. You see, there's a lot of costs that are never factored in. Yeah. So you can talk about what some palookas at the EU are going to do with tariffs, as if tariffs are a solution to anything. Yeah. You can talk about sleepy Joe Biden, who's senile, and his policies in the US. Why would Australia spend $1 trillion wiring up a new electricity grid? And we've got a perfectly good one now. That keeps the lights on. It's got this program running. It powers up our life. Instead, we're expected to go to windmills and solar panels that don't operate 24/7. So why would you go down this path? And if you want to talk about Europe, have a look what's happening there. They've had a wind drought, they've got high gas prices, and they're having to turn back on their coal-fired power generators. So at every turn, there's no argument for net zero 2050. It's a dry gully.